burst pad deconstruction at Massis, construction of the next booster maintenance stand at Sanchez, Mega Bay 2 glass at the build site, and a wall construction at the launch site continues. Welcome and thanks for stopping by for this week's Starbase Flyover Update episode 23, brought to you by the one and only RGV Aerial Photography. I'm Jeff A, and I'll be your host today as we check out the never-ending progress at all 4 SpaceX sites located near Boca Chica Beach in South Texas. There's lots to cover, so get some snacks, sit back and enjoy the views from 10,500 feet. Okay, let's begin here at Massis' structural test site. Special shout out to Proky for creating these labelled maps for all 4 sites at Starbase. Unfortunately, due to Mother Nature, we were unable to get a good enough image to create a comparison slider for you. We've got the changes covered though, so don't worry. We'll get started at the top of this image, where quite a bit of earthwork has occurred since the last flyover. The trench that was still visible in our last episode just to the right of B11 has now been filled in, and it appears that the work is now concluded, at least for now. The most noticeable change at Massis this week, however, is over at the burst pad. Crews have removed the earthen berms previously erected behind the test articles to stop or slow down the liquid nitrogen or water that is released. However, the berm to the right of the pad is still present. The E-Dome test tank is still sitting atop the pad following its testing back in October, but it certainly doesn't appear there will be additional tests anytime soon. It remains to be seen what SpaceX has in store for the southern end of this site. Moving down slightly, we see the cryogenic proofing pads and the 4 new hippos, also known as kettle reboilers, that were first spotted in our last episode. These hippos are essentially heat exchangers that use a liquid nitrogen bath surrounding coils of pipe, through which cryogenic liquids of higher boiling points flow. Cooling liquids beyond their normal cryogenic storage temperature and closer to their freezing point increases their density, while decreasing volume, thus allowing more to be stored in the same size tank on the vehicle and increasing efficiency. Shout out to O for these beautiful renders. We don't see any signs of work on those just yet, nor has much changed at the cryopads for that matter. After having undergone cryo testing on 2 separate occasions back in mid-October, we could see B11 roll back to the production site soon. Before that move occurs, it's possible they're waiting for the newest work stand to be installed inside Mega Bay 1. We're also still waiting for the next ship to arrive here, which should be S30. Near to the entry of Massis, Highway 4 is in the process of major repairs that may also be holding up any movements to and from Massis, as shown in this picture by one of our valued members, Todd, who recently visited Starbase for Lab Padre's Crowfest. Shifting down to the new building being constructed, we see more steel has been added since last week. The corrugated steel decking necessary for concrete support has been added to the mezzanine section of the building at the front. Additional supports have been added to the steel girders above the section that will house a bridge crane as well. Also, the last of the runway pieces have been put in place on the wall closest to us. There's still quite a bit of steel left to hang waiting near the building, but still no signs of the bridge crane assembly itself. Over where the structural test stands are kept, we can see S24.2 has been lowered into the test cage to prepare for upcoming structural integrity testing on Starship's payload bay. The lift occurred in the morning hours of November 2nd, after waiting nearly 1.5 months for preceding articles to finish testing. Check out this shot captured by Lab Padre's Raptorous cam of the crane lowering the test article inside the cage. Crews will now work to connect hydraulic actuators at the top and bottom of the article, as depicted in our previous episodes before testing begins. We've explained how the Starlink PEZ door works in previous videos, but essentially a vertical dispenser hosting multiple flat Starlink V3 satellites will be loaded into the massive interior of the ship's payload bay, measuring 8 meters wide and 8 meters long, as seen in this render by the space engineer. As the current design is space inefficient, only utilising the top half of the payload bay, verifying the design of the PEZ door will pave the way for future payload bay door designs, such as those fully utilising the full 13 to 14 metre tall space in the tapered nose cone. I would also be on the lookout for a potential stretch in the payload bay section, possibly by 1 or 2 rings in order to increase the amount of available payload space. As Elon Musk mentioned, an increase of 10 metres or about 5 rings in Starship. This is especially necessary since the volume in the tapered section is already quite limited by the presence of COPVs. Nevertheless, with more than 150 metric ton payload capacity to orbit, the current payload bay is much smaller in comparison. Getting this design finalised is essential if SpaceX wants more commercial satellite contracts than the one Superbird contract they currently have. Starship is volume constrained and faces steep competition by the likes of Vulcan, New Glenn, and maybe even Ariane 6, which all have longer payload bays than Starship. Next to S-24 sits the S-27 aft section, used to test new engine shielding for ships. It's still waiting its fate after being removed from the test cell the week prior. Switching views once more, we can see expansion of the new concrete pad in front of the liquid nitrogen tanks continues as crews are seen in action here working to smooth out a freshly poured batch. On the already existing pad to the right, we can see lines have been added to create additional parking for personnel at the site. To round out our coverage at Massis, we'll shift up and to the left just a little to where the newly poured pedestals await another cryo storage tank. Between the two sets of pedestals, we see a trench has been dug between the border of the site and the slab holding the existing tanks. This is likely to facilitate connection of power from an existing line at the edge of the site to the small building just on the other side of the tanks, seen better from this image here. That'll do for our flyover of Massis. Let's try to get out of these clouds and head down to Sanchez. Here's a labelled map of the site for those new to the channel or those just needing a refresher. Now that you're familiar with Sanchez, let's use the slider to compare the site on Friday, October 27th with Friday, November the 3rd. Getting started with a view from the north side of Sanchez, we can see some minor progress on the ground fabrication building has been made since our last flyover. Crews finished installing the ridge cap on the centre roof section and have now begun covering the roof to the left. Behind the building we can see a tank for what is likely argon welding gas has already been installed. Further down we see operators working to fill in the conduit trench in the already completed areas. On the left side of this image we can see what appears to be more legs for a white stand like the two already completed. However, if we switch angles and add the 6 newly discovered legs to the already existing 10 seen toward the front of the building, we end up with 16. If each stand only requires 10 legs, 6 legs would remain after the third stand currently under construction is completed and mounted. Does this mean there could potentially be more stands on the way, possibly for Mega Bay 2? It certainly appears that way. We'll have to watch out for more steel deliveries in the future. Moving over to the stand construction area, we see crews are making quick work of the next white stand. With the second stand out of the way and moved into Mega Bay 1, crews have focused their efforts on stand number 3 and are currently welding the primary structural components of the ring together. To the left we can see a third work platform has popped up in just the past week and already has a majority of the supports welded together. Not much change visible up where the black stands are located, but we can see the hold-down clamps on the resting arms of the right-hand stand much more clearly in this week's flyover, as they glimmer in the morning sunlight. Looks like we'll be waiting yet another week at least before finding out what these stands might be for. Moving to the left of the newest work platform under construction, we see some mysterious components being fabricated just outside the 2 white tents. Without ground photos, it's difficult to determine the exact shape of these odd pieces, whether they're flat or have depth, but they're unlike anything we've seen constructed before. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on these in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. Let's see what's new down in the scrapyard. At first glance, it appears much more empty. The ring stands previously located here, as well as the old aft section, seem to have disappeared. Is this area getting cleared for even more infrastructure upgrades? If we pan over to the air separation plant, or what's left of it, we can see most of these components seem to have taken up residence in this location for some reason. Surely they're not turning this into the new scrapyard. Or are they? The scrapyard seems to be wherever they can find the most readily available space. Over at the water treatment plant, it looks like a few trenches have been dug where the concrete slab was torn up in the previous flyover. Plumbing or conduit for the new hardware appears to be going into place. Before we head any further toward the rocket garden, let's check the progress of the new building being constructed next to the power distribution lot. During the flyover, we saw crews in the process of pouring the concrete walls around the structure and inside. Scaffolding and formwork can be seen inside and out. We can even see a concrete truck offloading into a small mobile concrete pump. This is shaping up to be a pretty substantial structure for whatever they have planned to go inside here. Switching to a view from the south side of Highway 4, just beside the power distribution lot, we can see one of the two white vertical tanks that used to reside here has now been removed. These tanks were just moved to this location from the air separation unit lot a few weeks ago. Over in the dirt next to the water storage tanks, it looks like two new areas are being prepared for additional concrete pours. More interestingly, however, below the tanks we can see two SPMTs loaded with counterweights and a ship transport stand lurking. Could it be, is the time for S28's departure from the engine installation stand near? Let's take a peek at the rocket garden, shall we? While S28 appears unchanged still, we can't help but think it has to be close to being ready enough for engine testing. As of November 5th, the ship has been atop this stand for exactly 3 months. During this time, vents and also potentially antennas have been added to the nose cone and crews have steadily been going in and out of the two tanks. Meanwhile, the heat shield tiles around the weld seams of the barrel sections were tested, with many apparently failing, and haven't been reapplied since. At this point, with IFT2 looming ever closer, it seems it may not be until the next launch when we see S28 heading to the launch site for testing. Up above S28, we see S26 has found its home next to S29, since it wasn't yet in place during our last flyover, but moved just after. Over to the left in this image is the ship puckshucker stand beside B4. However, since the flyover occurred, the puckshucker and SPMTs carrying it have been spotted next to the other SPMTs holding the ship transport stand we saw earlier. Perhaps, as mentioned before, we are close to S30 coming out of the high bay and heading down to Massis for cryoproofing. And that's a wrap for Sanchez. Up next, the ever-expanding build site. Now entering the build site, where SpaceX is making good progress on various construction projects meant to increase the production rate of starships. Please refer to Proky's map of the various bays and factories as we make our way around the site. Let's use the slider tool again to show the ongoing construction of Mega Bay 2, the old tents area, and Star Factory's roof panels. Jumping right into this beautiful shot of the top of the build site, where we notice cladding installation on the sides of Mega Bay 2 have been completed all the way up to the roof section, where the LR 11000 crane can be seen lifting some of the last of the white steel beams for the roof structure. As seen in these ground shots taken by photographer Carlos Nunez, aka Starbase Surfer, the vertical elevator shafts were under construction as of the taking of this photo on October 31st. Not for long though, as we look down this image to see the last two remaining elevator segments to be lifted into the holes at the back of Mega Bay 2. But there's something else due to be lifted into Mega Bay 2. What is it? Maybe removing this cloud will help. Indeed, hidden behind these clouds are rows upon rows of glass panels we assume will be installed onto the sides of Mega Bay 2's office level. We saw these window panes loaded on trucks parked on Highway 4 last week, leading us to falsely conclude that they were destined for the Star Factory, which is now less likely due to their staging in the ring yard. Here's a close-up of them taken by another of our valued members, Dave Avery, while he too was visiting Starbase recently for the festivities known as Crowfest. Now moving on to Mega Bay 1 in this picture, where we zoom in to see the second Raptor engine installation stand moved here last week, as well as Booster 13 barely visible on the right. Here is Booster 10, which is still on its own engine installation stand, receiving its 33 Raptors ahead of rollout to the launch site. Shifting left to the high bay now, where we see Ship 30 and 31, with Ship 31 yet to receive its aft flaps. We'll have to switch to Lab Padre's camera to see this image of S32 being stacked onto its mid-lock section on November 3rd, with just one section remaining, the aft thrust section, before this ship is fully stacked. Next up, we zoom out and to the right to see the previous locations of Tents 1 and 2 and the mid-bay, where groundwork is ongoing for future Star Factory expansion. Since last week, 2 rows of square footings have been dug, whereupon they will be laid with rebar and then poured with concrete in anticipation for vertical pillar installation. Meanwhile, at the taller nose cone construction part of Star Factory, crews were hard at work this week lifting horizontal and X-shaped steel bracings, as well as cladding, as seen from the RGV cam footage captured on November 1st. And our last stop at the build site is going to be on the very left side of Boca Chica Village, where we see groundwork and preparation for a new housing lot. This is a likely destination for additional Airstream trailers like those seen just below, which are for employees of Starbase. Would you be willing to live in one of these trailers to work at Starbase? I don't know about you, but I'd much rather live in these more permanent houses under construction to the right. We may not all have the privilege of living right next to Starbase, but if you're seeking a front row seat to the future of space exploration, we encourage you to join our public Discord server full of dedicated Starbase watchers just like you. Link is in the description. Now let's move over to the launch site. Once again, to help you get familiarised, here's a labelled map of the launch site. For those of you who've made it this far, you can find links to all of these maps in the description below. Looking at the slider again, we can see changes from the last flyover. Over at the suborbital site, we can see that the power connection work to the suborbital site is continuing. We expect this to take a few weeks, and after that some concrete pouring to reopen the entrance from Highway 4. Over to the left is the new wall, which we saw in last week's episode is still being worked on. You can see some concrete forms staged for installation for further pouring. Credit once again goes to Starbase Surfer for this amazing shot. Give him a follow on X or Patreon. We speculate these walls are for privacy and protection from the road and wetlands, as well as minimising the need to clean up the areas beyond of debris following a launch of Starship. Switching to this view further east at the tank farm expansion area, we can see 3 more pipe racks have been added to the collection since our last flyover, which we anticipate will be used for the new plumbing associated with the soon-to-come horizontal tanks for this location. Speaking of the tank farm, there's not much work happening on the subcooler upgrades as of late, with pipework from our last flyover still visible in this same location. We anticipated these upgrades wouldn't be completed until after IFT2, and it appears that's currently the plan. Much of the pipework is already prepared, and some of it is staged ahead of installation, so once final tie-ins start, it should be a very fast process. If we look closer, we notice that concrete has been ripped up around the former cryostations to the north of the orbital launch tower. We don't know what they're planning to do here as of now, but we'll keep an eye on it. Over at the orbital launch pad, Ship 25 was stacked and destacked again in less than 24 hours for a 5th time, tying the previous mark set by B7 and S24. We believe this is possibly for a photo shoot for the latest update on their webpage for the up-and-coming IFT2 launch, or maybe just some final fit checkouts. Something important to note is that the US Fish and Wildlife Service has been seen at Starbase multiple times in recent weeks, overseeing the cleanup of IFT-1 debris from the wetlands near the launch pad. This is likely a part of the ongoing cleanup required by the FWS, so Starship can receive a launch license as soon as possible. Speaking about a potential launch soon, SpaceX shared on Friday, November 3rd, a post on X saying that the second flight test of a fully integrated Starship could launch as soon as mid-November, pending regulatory approval. And they added a link to their official website that had been updated with all the information about the upcoming flight, just like the countdown sequence, and post-launch timings as well as an infographic. Wrapping up episode 23 of Starbase Flyover Update with a bit of exciting news. SpaceX has posted closures for November 13th to November 15th, from 12 AM to 2 PM local time, the same times as IFT-1. Don't be discouraged by the non-flight closure label, as IFT-1's flight closures were also initially listed as non-flight. As SpaceX makes progress towards a second integrated flight test, I'd like to thank you for watching this video until the end, as well as remind you to subscribe and click the notification bell for timely flyover updates each week. I'm Jeff A, and we'll see you next week from 10,500 feet. Cheers for now.